Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to Break the Silo. I am your host, Nathan McNathanson, and that's your other host, Timothy McTimmonson. And we also have Christopher McChristensen. He's with us. He's joining us tonight from heaven. He was not able to be here in his corporeal form, which is okay. You know, it's all right. Everybody has to graduate from one thing to another, and he's just moved on. So, with that being said, tonight we're gonna be doing a mishmash tonight, right? We're gonna kind of play by ear a little bit, but we have a big story about which is kind of like, I mean, it's been around because it's been a slow roll, but there's the USDA giving aid to disadvantaged farmers, which turns out to be maybe black farmers, and then there's other farmers who are suing to try to stop that. So we'll get into all that in a little bit because we've done a bit of a deep dive on that. There's a couple other things too. We might have a little bit of philosophy later on if we, feel like it. So, with that, Tim, we're gonna go to you first, and let's get right into the news and memes.
All right, something I just ran across I thought was interesting.
Is that Pew Research?
Puberty
I
Research.
love Pew Research, man. It's the color scheme. I think it's all the color scheme.
It is Pew Research, yes. So this particular article is talking about the increase in foreign trust confidence in the U.S. ever since President Trump's left office, and I thought this particular graph was pretty funny. So this hilarious. Is only showing Germany, France, UK, and Spain, right? There's definitely other countries that would vary from this, you can see, like, during Bush's presidency, the confidence wasn't very good. Then Obama crushed it, and then Trump was like, rah. I mean, I expected him to be much lower than Bush. I guess at the end of Bush, though, yeah. And then as soon as Biden gets in, honestly, it's like, boop. That's true. It's close to zero there, huh? Down here.
Wait, I forgot to ask. Chris, can you see?
I can't, but I'll be all right.
Okay. Well, we should be describing things. Ladies and gentlemen who are listening to just the audio only, we apologize. We're really not good. If you don't know, this is also a YouTube show, so you should totally check us out there. But we're still getting used to describing things. So Timothy, do your best there.
Yeah, it's a graph. It's goes
colors.
From left to right. It's got colors and lines. It shows the confidence of Western Europe across different presidencies, and Bush between 2001 and 2008, he ranged between 50% to maybe 10%
pretty low
confidence. Yeah. Obama, from the beginning of his presidency to the end, had a little dip in the middle, but didn't change overall too much, but probably ranges from about 90 to 60%. And then during Trump's presidency, he peaked there in the late middle at maybe 30%, but is down
peaked.
To the 10.
The rest of it, the rest of the countries are down there around 10. Yeah,
and then immediately from when Trump left and Biden came in, it goes up to like 75 about-ish.
Yeah, so look, man. So I don't really like the nationalist / globalist debate, because everybody who says globalist is automatically a conspiracy theorist. But you kind of see the two camps right there. So the Republicans are apparently more nationalist than the Democrats, and I mean that's kind of obvious. Like Obama was a huge, when he was running for president, I think he did a tour of Europe. Like, why? I was just hearing about this today, actually. So, a lot of people think the left is globalist and the right is nationalist. I mean, that seems to be pretty obvious. So, it's sort of, that tracks, right? So I would assume Obama would have massive approval rating internationally, and besides, the guy's super charismatic.
Well, it's not. I mean, if you look at the bar chart right below it, it's also a matter of character. And this is something I've talked about a lot as we talked about the presidency and Trump in the past, which was, I feel like the person that represents the country should have certain qualities about them. And so this particular graph breaks out 4 different traits, I guess, of a president. One is well qualified, one is a strong leader, one is dangerous, and one is arrogant. So two good traits and two bad traits. And the graph shows Trump having only 16% of the people thinking he's well qualified, 46% of people thinking he's a strong leader, 72% of people thinking he's dangerous, and 90% of people thinking he's arrogant. And Biden has 77% of people thinking he's well qualified, 62% a strong leader, only 14% think he's dangerous, and 13% think he's arrogant.
Yeah, so again, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with those people, but again, like a globalist United States president who embraces Europe and says, I love all of you guys and all that kind of stuff, they're going to like him, therefore they're going to grade him better. I'm not even saying that they're wrong necessarily. I'm just saying, like, obviously they like him more.
Yeah.
Plus Europe is more left than the United States. So, like, our left-wing presidents are their regular presidents. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
For what it's worth, whereas today international politics come off as more of a concern on the left and the right, that certainly isn't true at the congressional level, and it almost certainly isn't true about history. I mean, we've become such a globalized society that there's always been an emphasis on foreign affairs. I mean, look at Jimmy Carter, look at Reagan. Like, you see people in the past that were heavily entrenched in international affairs openly to their constituents without avoiding that disclosure. And yeah, no, I would say pretty bipartisan. I mean, as we've gotten through this kind of America First mentality, yeah, foreign perception is, gets favored on the left because the left has taken, like, hey, we should continue to care about, like, our role in the international world, government. But I would say today it's just one more thing that's been politicized more so than the past has put it in that circle of politicization.
Yeah, you kind of reminded me. It seems to be that obviously, Bush was the one that started all those wars, so it's kind of inaccurate to say, left, right here. It seems to me, which is very interesting to me, that the populist movement actually has a lot of isolationist tendencies, which is it's kind of the opposite of what I would think. But like everybody was so excited when Trump, like, no new wars, thumbs up, great, fantastic, just like killed one guy or two. That was it.
Yeah, I mean, at least, I guess it's interesting because now Biden is actually removing troops, and that's creating, like, this very weird catechism of debate on, like, anti-war /
right.
Are we destabilizing an area? Should we have taken a nation-building approach? What would it? But again, if Biden said, "Oh, we're keeping troops there to help heal the government," he would have been criticized for nation building. And so it was really, I don't know, it's an interesting conversation. But it's he's kind of taken, in a sense, like he's without saying it explicitly, he's rode the wave of let's look out for our country first, without saying it that way. But also, he is staying true to himself. Like, even under Obama, he butted heads on engagement in the Middle East. Like, he wanted to bring troops home much more aggressively, even as vice president.
That's interesting. I hadn't planned on bringing this up. We can either bookmark and talk about it later, but we might as well right now. I'm kind of curious what you guys think about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, because just personally speaking, I didn't think about it very much at all. I knew, this seemed to be like 20 years in the making. This is just generally something that I've been thinking about. Yeah, we've been over there too long. I think we're wasting a whole bunch of money. We should probably leave. And that was probably the extent of thought I put into it. And then, surprise, surprise, Ben Shapiro's not so happy about it. But, I listened to why he's not so happy about it. And it kind of dawned on me, like, to me, I'm much more worried now that we're screwing over our allies, right? Nobody had put it to me that way before. But, there's young Afghan women who used to be able to go to school. And now when the Taliban is going to take over, which inevitably they are, they're going to get stuffed back into burqas and get, if they try to take them off, they're going to get acid thrown in their face. And it's about to become a repressive hellhole again. So it's like, I'm pretty conflicted. Like, I'm somewhat isolationist by temperament, let's say, but it seems to be a negative thing that we pulled out, the skeleton force that was there. Now all these atrocities are going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my opinion is pretty similar. On gut instinct, it's like, yeah, I want to pull the troops back. But with further thinking, it's kind of interesting because there's two sides to it. On one side, our country has done what we were supposed to do. We did invest a ton in training their military. We did a ton in helping out with resources, and we gave them a 20-year buffer that they could have utilized this time to put more energy in places rather than just having us as like the symbolic deterrence, because that's what we were. Because it's like, right, if the Taliban invades and kills even one American troop, all out warfare immediately, right, and the Taliban would have been crushed. And so there was a symbolic deterrence. At the same time, the Afghan government explicitly said in interviews, like the president, even generals, when they were over here meeting with Biden, were interviewed by our reporters at the Times, at the Post, and they literally said that they thought this was a bluff. They were like, what do you want us to do to keep troops here? Like, no, we're actually pulling them out. They really thought this was just this giant 5-year bluff. Like, they really never thought that American troops were going to get pulled out, and therefore there was no serious contingency plan. So it's like, well, what are we supposed to do? And we are doing for what it's worth, anybody who had significant involvement with the military, be it, now spouses, translators, engineers, they're all getting citizenship. So they're already being flown out to areas that are considered safe. They're going to be, streamlined for automatic citizenship here in the United States because they served us like incredibly through the military. So to me, it's like we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. We should have, and there was a lot of criticism that we didn't.
Yes.
A lot of criticism, and a lot of people died because of us.
Yep.
So at least we learned from that. But
I guess
again, it doesn't change the fact it's like, it's messed up. The region's going to be destabilized, but we're not supposed to be nation builders.
Well,
even though we are, we do.
We are what we are, I suppose. You can call it a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, young Afghan women getting to go to school is probably a good thing for the low cost of maintaining a skeleton force there.
Yeah, I know. I personally think that with the knowledge that Afghanistan seriously didn't have a backup plan, we should have stayed a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I think knowing that, it's like, oh my gosh, we should have maintained. And some top generals are now retiring because they're just saying, hey, this really went against our wishes, so it's time that we call it a day and get our pension.
What about you, Tim? What do you think about all this? It's a tough situation. I've kind of heard arguments on both sides, and I think you gotta even. I don't agree that we're not nation builders, that we shouldn't go out and try and help or get involved in other people's affairs ever. I do feel like if we do put our nose in it, then we need to make sure we do it right and that we make things better for them. But you also have to look at the total amount of effort put in, the amount of time put in, and try and think, like, is it a fixable situation? And I don't know enough about this situation in Afghanistan to say it is or it isn't, or it is right or wrong or whatever. But I mean, after 20 years, and I think it's $100 billion that we've put into their economy and other things, helping to fund their military and train their military and arm their military, not just in cost of us being there, but like stuff and things we've given to them.
Yeah.
For them to be still unable to defend themselves, it either needs to like almost go back to colonization, when you're like, okay, now you're a part of our protection, right? Like is it to that level? Should we go and just be there now? Should they, or what? Like, when can you draw the line and say you're on your own now to deal with your own issues? And I don't know that right now is the right time or not, but I don't think that we should plan on being there forever. And so eventually you have to draw that line and leave, right?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think, like if you were to draw parallels, I mean, we still have troops stationed in Europe. We still have the bases that we built, when we had troops stationed in West Germany to help prevent against the excesses of Russia. We still have bases in Japan after conquering them in World War II. We still have bases in North Korea. Or, I'm sorry, I wish South Korea to
look at
North Koreans, and they flourish because of it.
Our country does a good job hiding the fact as well that presidents have their goals, but I've learned this recently from a good friend of mine, but the CIA has massive influence in regime change, regime building, regime destabilization. We are absolutely an imperialistic country. There's no denying it. We are the wealthy nation that we are today because we've been an imperialist nation through the 21st century. We have our hands in every country in South America. We have our hands in every country in the world, basically. Now, granted, there's other world powers that we butt heads with and we have to compromise with, but all developing countries we have our hands in. It's pretty nuts.
Well, we'd have to maybe argue it out one day whether that's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, it's easy to say it's a bad thing, but then also it's we are benefiting remarkably from it. So it's a weird there's definitely a sense of desensitization and also a level of plausible deniability, right? You and I, the average person doesn't realize oh wow, I'm hardworking, I have a job, I'm doing these things, I'm going to school, I have a loan for my house, I'm doing right, and we feel good about that. We feel we worked really hard for it. We don't always think about the context of our country that has allowed it for us to do that, and what our country has done to the rest of the world to create a country of wealth. Because it's at the end of the day, things zero out. If one person's wealthy, another person isn't. So, there's something to be said about some American imperialism, and whether or not that's good or bad, I would say that that's worth a whole special podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So I have an interesting story. Wait, is it my turn? Man, I lose track. Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Okay. Get this title. This is fantastic. Chinese ships have dumped so much poop in the South China Sea, you can see it from space. Report. So this is fantastic. Yeah. So
what do we do with that information?
I don't know what you do with that information.
Do we clean it up?
Ponder it? No. So it's not. All right. So it's interesting. So this is not just any poop. This is not just it's coming out of a river. This is strategic poop. So they're literally dropping it. They're dropping it in areas that destroy coral reefs.
Why?
Right? Because they're assholes. Okay, so this is there's a whole bunch of ongoing stuff in the Spratly Islands areas in the South China Sea, right? There's a huge power struggle, and just about everything they do is either subtly or not so subtly aimed at either shoring up those Spratly Islands, which this could be a part of, or degrading the territory of either the Philippines or Taiwan or Japan. For example, I read an article, a pretty good article, probably a couple months back, where China is just doing the most ridiculous. It's so passive aggressive, and there's no way for Taiwan to stop it. They literally send out civilian sand trawlers, and what they do is they float over the ocean over to Taiwan, and then they'll just sit a couple miles off the shore within their waters, but then they'll just take sand. They'll just take sand from Taiwan, pull it up into the boat, and leave with it. And then they'll come back and they'll do it again. And it's they're taking so much sand that it's going to start eroding the coastline of Taiwan. And what do you do about that? Right? Because the second you either shoot at or arrest the ships, you're going to start, China's going to claim that you aggressed them and then they'll invade or something like that. So it's you can literally do nothing. And China's just doing they're dropping poop in the ocean. They're killing coral reefs with poop. Why are they doing it? I don't know, because China is asshole. So, I just thought everybody should know that. They're dropping poop in the ocean.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I know it's really not much to discuss on that, so I just wanted to bring... Look, everybody remember...
Don't go swimming in the South China Sea.
Don't go swimming in the South China Sea. I mean, you'll be shot for trespassing anyways, but just don't forget that China's out there doing nefarious stuff like dumping poop in the ocean. It's always a looming threat. Back to you, Tim.
Let's do some more Pew Research.
Oh, I love Pew Research, man.
I kind of just spent like a half hour earlier this week.
No, you just browse Pew sometime.
And
just browse
pulled a couple things up I thought was interesting. So this one I thought was an interesting just data point. It says Black and Hispanic adults feel more connected to roots than white adults. And yeah, and so the question, looking back at their cultural origin, like how do they feel connected to that, right? And so for all adults, it's about 50% don't really feel a strong connection, and 46% do feel a strong connection with their cultural origin of their family. But then when you look at it goes white, Black, and Hispanic. Whites, only 36% feel a strong connection with their cultural origin. Black is 61% and Hispanic is 71%. And nice. I thought it was interesting, and I also think it can make sense. I mean, generally, at least in the U.S., specifically Hispanic, and then also for Black potentially, they have less of less generations here, so they have a closer connection, maybe. Also, it could just be a cultural thing, but the one of the things that I took away from this a little bit is, like, if somebody uses a derogatory term about Germans or Irishmen or anything that is my cultural heritage, I also have really, really thick skin, but even outside of that, like, it doesn't bother me at all.
You're not alone in what you're about to say. I mean,
right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of sparked on me a little bit, like, well, maybe that's part of why there's such a stronger part of the reason why there's such a stronger reaction to, derogatory terms, thrown their way. Not to say it's right, wrong, or right. I'm just, this could play a piece in that. But I thought it was an interesting data point, at least, that there's just less connection to your heritage there. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts or takeaways from it?
Chris?
I'm not surprised by it. I think when it comes to, like, racial terminology and whatnot, and sensitivity on it, I think there's a little bit too of, like, I'm sure this is part of it. This is part of many other layers, right? Like, I agree. I'm sure that having, like, a stronger sense of your cultural identity means, like, of course you're going to take to heart when someone calls you something derogatory. I do think it's laid on a few other things as well, like the oppression, the history of racism in the country, the history of, like, but yeah, I'm sure this is a slice of that. It's definitely a slice to it. But yeah, I'm not surprised. For what it's worth, our country is very interesting when we look at the racial history of it, especially with the white majority, is that I think that there's an argument, I'm not going to do it justice, but there's a big argument to be said that as the United States has progressed throughout history since the foundation, 1800s, 1900s, there's been this, like, as European countries have come over, gone through their kind of, like, hazing process, whether it was the Irish or the Italians, the Scots, they eventually get absorbed into the white majority, so they're no longer seen for their identity either. Like, right now we most recently experienced this with, like, at least in Connecticut, with, like, Polish immigrants. Like, Polish immigrants are now part of, like, the white majority. 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. We still can recognize people as Polish, but given another 20 years, 20, 30 years, that's going to begin to dissolve a little bit more as well, because that's just what happens with the white majority. Whereas, like, there's been a very clear connotation between those who are white and then people who are of color. So
Let me argue you this. So I think what you just said actually applies more to minorities. Maybe a little bit. Okay, so actually, let me say more to black people, probably less to Hispanics, because I think like a Puerto Rican knows he's a freaking Puerto Rican, right? And if you call him anything else, he's going to be mad at you. But like I for some reason I feel like they just have the most distinct background. But like, I mean, as far as Americans are concerned, like a black person is a black person, right? We don't even we can't even be like, oh, that's a Nigerian, that's that like that comes out in the census data. Other than that,
you can't even name more than one
American. What's that, Tim?
Said you couldn't even name more than one.
Yeah, right. So look, yeah, exactly, right, yeah. Is Congo? That's a country, right? Yeah. But yeah, so I think what you just said kind of applies. What about this, Chris? Here's what I think. I think it's because we consider quote unquote white culture, and that's a gross oversimplification. There's like 30-something distinct cultures in the United States, but quote unquote white culture feels like vanilla. And so when we are asked, both ways, both in looks and feeling, rather. So when we're asked, do we feel ties to, say, our Italian history or our, Irish history or our Scottish history? The answer is no, because we feel affinity towards the American quote unquote white culture, right? Whereas African Americans, I think they consider the culture that they exist in to be their heritage, right? So their heritage is the continuation of black people in America, like the African American heritage, as opposed to their African heritage. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, there's definitely something to be said about African American heritage, African American history, and African American culture that has developed. I believe there's now, it's as immigrants have come to the United States as well. There is, I ran into this a lot when I was teaching, and I learned to become more conscientious of my students who were, Jamaican, or for those who were, because we had a lot of Jamaican students who immigrated to where I was teaching versus those who were, it was a black majority community. And so it was an interesting thing to navigate because, I made very sure to denotate, we want to represent those who are Jamaican as well, because there was a huge cultural identity there that was to be celebrated and acknowledged. I don't know. It's complicated. Yeah. I'm on the fence where hey, I'll celebrate and support all of the above, whatever, the more the better. So.
All right. Tim, I think it's your turn.
Okay, I'll go again.
Did you just do that? Yeah, you did just do that. You had some Pew Research. No, you go again. I have one more after that, I think.
Okay. Let's see. Let's do Mr. Trump. Got to do at least one Trump talk, right? So this is a picture. It's actually the PDF of the class action complaint that Mr. Donald Trump filed. It was filed against Google, against Facebook, and against Twitter. I think a big part of it was, the canceling of accounts or blocking of accounts and other things, but it's also got some other stipulations and things in there. But the thing I found interesting is he filed it in his home state of Florida, in Miami, in fact, but to a federal court. But as this person that I just randomly found on Twitter, but I had heard from elsewhere, says, for both Facebook and for Twitter, their terms of service require that any legal disputes are filed in either a federal court in Northern California for Facebook, or for Twitter that is filed in the federal or state courts in San Francisco County. So those two particularly are filed in the wrong jurisdiction and will just be thrown out, most likely.
People are saying the lawsuit as a whole is a stunt, right? And
generally,
I'm on the fence with that. I still, even after this presidency, I don't know if he's smarter than he looks or dumber than he looks, or let's say as dumb as he looks, right? Because I've seen him do what looks like underwater, 3D, 4D chess. But then he files this in the wrong. Right. So here's what I'm getting at. Here's my question to you guys: is he doing this deliberately, or is it just because he's this stupid? Right. So is he deliberately filing this in such a way that he knows will get thrown out, but it looks like he tried, or is he just stupid and he filed it in the wrong districts?
From what I've heard and what I've read on this, most people agree with you that this was just a PR stunt. And I don't think Trump is intelligent, but I don't think he's I think he's street smart, but not smart, if that makes sense. So I think he knows what he's doing. I think he's doing it on purpose.
But not like the actual streets.
I forget what the number. Yeah, right. People smart. Let me say that.
Sure. Yeah.
I forget the number I heard now, but within a couple days of this being announced, the legal group or the nonprofit group that he's associating this with got some millions or something of donations or whatever, right? The whole point was PR stunt, donations. And I think he knows that. I think the people that are stupid and he knows that, are the ones that fall for this shit. Like that's what I think he's people smart. I think he knows his audience, and I think he knows his audience is just going to eat it up and not pay attention to the details, and they're not going to care that it's a problem. And he's going to be able to spin this. When these get thrown out of court, he's going to come back and say,
I'm curious I'm not following him. I really should be following him more, especially since I'm the resident conservative on the show, but I don't know. I'm not a populist, guys. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best for you, but I can't really. I'll just Tim, my populist friends aren't stupid. That's it. That's all I have to say about that.
I'm not trying to call anyone stupid. I'm just saying they're not. They trust the wrong guy. Let's say that.
I would agree with that. I know they don't. What about you, Chris? PR stunt or you think stupidity?
I think he honestly, it's really simple to me. I think he's an idiot, and I think he is just grabbing for straws at this point to just he is desperate for attention, man, and that's what he's doing. He's a total textbook just narcissist.
Yeah. Well, maybe
the dude just misses being at the Wall Street Journal.
You think he's desperate for attention? I feel like he still gets a ton of attention.
Not what he was getting.
Can you be desperate for something that you constantly get? I mean, sure.
he was on the front page of the New York Times for 4 years straight.
True. He would just be he'd just be on the toilet at night and send out a tweet and then read all the stories about it the next day.
Yeah, no, it literally he would be front page news every channel. He was like that for 4 or 5 years, and now he's been his blog didn't even get any views. His blog.
They would pull in the analysts. They would pull in his blog. Yeah, oh my God.
He had
no views. So, he did. He shut it down because it had no views.
Right, exactly.
I didn't even know he had one.
Exactly. Which is crazy because he's polling above my boy DeSantis, which is very disappointing to me. I gotta say.
I don't like DeSantis.
We'll have to. You know what? We'll hash that out in 3 years, I guess. Or is it 2 years at this point when they start running?
Yeah, it's coming up. I mean, we'll start seeing presidential serious talks once the midterms wrap up.
True. Okay, all right. I've got one. So this actually, it's about Trump again, and you actually reminded me of this, Chris, when we were talking before the show started. We said something about Trump. Something about Trump saying that he won the election or something like that. And it reminded me of this story that I actually just read this today. So it's a pretty simple article. I'm not going to go too much into this. We can basically just talk about the title. It says, drunk Rudy Giuliani told Trump to just say he won on election night, book claims. So this was a book that was put out. I think it was by one of Donald Trump's aides or something like that. The article continues basically just kind of fluffs out what it says right there. So Rudy Giuliani was drunk and he kept trying to get past the advisors to go tell Trump, like, hey man, just call those states for you and claim victory. Just do it, right? And so eventually, I guess he got through to Trump, and then Trump went up on stage and said, frankly, we did win, right? And which is where he lost me forever. But that's a whole other story. So I just thought that was interesting because this is one of those things where I have friends and family who, they're still pro-Trump. They want Trump to run again. They'll vote for Trump. They don't have any problem with Trump. And like, I'm the only one I know who was a Trump supporter who is basically standing on principle, saying like, yeah, I enjoyed the stuff that he did. Not all of it, but I enjoyed the way that he governed. I enjoyed the stuff that he did. But the very moment that he said, frankly, we did win the election, he was done. Right. He was absolutely done. And that's going to be my stance. It doesn't matter if it's just him versus Joe Biden. Right. And I'm like I'm the only one that I know that seems to care about that. And then this article comes out, and now I could, if I wanted to, blame Rudy Giuliani, but Trump still went up and did it, right? And he's responsible for his own actions.
Yeah, but even if he'd have left it at that, on that night saying, frankly, we won, and then the next night been like, oh, okay, we didn't.
Conceded.
You probably would still be on Trump's side. I don't know. I mean, that was the turning point, but that's the point where he just couldn't backtrack from.
Yeah, it's the turning point in hindsight, right? If he then continued to say it from then on out and tried to push Mike Pence to not certify the results, and yes, all that stuff. So when I say this was the turning point, obviously at that point I was still like, okay, what the heck? Okay, prove it in court, right? That was basically what I was saying the whole time. I was like, okay, sure, prove it in court, right? And then he proceeded to absolutely not do that and still say that he was winning. So.
Yeah.
Do you think, well, first I just want to say thank you, because you are like generally the only conservative I know that even cares about that. Like everybody else goes, a lot of other people on the Republican side, they really think that the election was stolen. Like people really, really believe it, which is worth like a textbook PhD on the power of propaganda and the power of influence. But secondary to all of that,
not really. I mean, there's still religion in the world.
There's I actually, I have on that note, not to get too much far down the rabbit hole, because I do just want to say, Rudy Giuliani is either insane or they have mega dirt on Rudy. I don't know which one it is, but
who's they?
Trump. But finally, I just want to say, like,
more than Borat.
Yeah. Borat got some good dirt. I bet they have a whole like porno with Rudy Giuliani in it, just God. Like, hey, Rudy, go sue 30 courts, otherwise we're leaking it. And he's like, all right, guys.
Yeah.
And now he's debarred. But
True.
I have a good friend that I'm not going to share his name because I know he wouldn't want me to. But I really respect his opinion. He's a doctoral student, and a lot of his research, and actually teaches at a Christian university. But a lot of his research, and he's put me onto a few other like articles. It's a huge argument to be said right now that political identity is more salient than religious identity. Like people are basically filtering their world now entirely through their politics. Like think about just in your own lives. Like maybe not so much for you, Tim, because you're really like a textbook moderate. But like Nate, like I catch myself on this podcast basing when you ask me a question that is I will look in my mind. Well, what would Joe Biden do in this situation? What are their thoughts? What are my party's thoughts?
Right.
That's terrifying, and I know you must do the same thing because that's what's happening.
Ideological possession.
Like we are looking at political parties, but it's happening at a really scary level. Like people are really filtering their worldview. Majority of people through their political identity in the same way that people filtered their world in their Christian religious identity in the 1950s.
Right now,
pretty scary stuff.
Now take that one step further, and this is always my bone to pick with Tim because he thinks that religion is, whether it's right or wrong, he thinks that A, religion is wrong, and B, that it's bad.
Do not think it's wrong. I don't think it's bad for people. You're putting words in my mouth. I do not.
Yes, I will put all those words in your mouth. I'm taking the words that came out of your mouth and putting them back in your mouth. Anyways, so so before when the nation was entirely Christian, we at least had all of this ideological possession coming from the same point of view. So we knew what game everybody was playing. Now everybody's fractured off into all their little camps. We've got the anarcho-capitalists, we got the libertarians, we got the left, we got the right, we got the populists, and now those are the religions. And people being ideologically possessed by diametrically opposed ideologies is like, I think, rapidly tearing the country apart. And I think the evidence is, man, I can't think of it.
The evidence is self-evident.
Thank you. Yeah. Perfect. I love it. So, I just think we'll have to do this sometime. We'll have to hash out on religion, because I think regardless of the fact of whether I believe a religion is true or not, I think the country would hypothetically be better if everybody was a particular religion.
Probably, but I think the concern today. Well, the concern today too is that again, I think political identity is becoming as powerful as religion.
Yeah, which would be good if we all had great political identities, but we don't.
I mean, you hear about more than anything in politics these days. It feels like all you hear about is the culture war between the left and the right. It's not even about any individual policy anymore. The policy doesn't matter. It's what one side believes versus the other, and the other side's evil for it. It's just so.
Yeah, but I mean, the difference is that my guys are right.
Yeah, and we're left. And by we, I mean him, because I'm slightly left.
Got him!
Yeah.
Punny. Very punny. Yeah,
but,
Our side is the correct side.
All right.
I think both sides have correct views on things and bad views on things. Mm-hmm.
That's the whole show. All right, see you guys next week.
Yeah, there we go.
They did it. They said the title.
There it is, the title of the show.
Have you guys? I know you have, Nate, because we talked about it off camera at one point. Chris, have you heard about the? This is old. I think it's from 2014 or something when they did this. But when I don't know if it's all of California or just in San Francisco, but they made it so that the limit for a felony for theft went from like $400 or $450 up to $950. Have you heard about that?
Are you saying that you're saying that the limit for misdemeanor, right?
No, the limit for it to be a felony. If it's over 950, it becomes a felony.
Right. You're talking about goods stolen. Did you hear about this? That Chris?
No, I hadn't. I hadn't heard about that yet.
So I hadn't heard about it until very recently either, but I guess this happened in 2014, and since then there's been a massive uptick in crime in San Francisco, and this video, you won't be able to hear it, but it's just hilarious to watch. It was taken recently. Sorry, Chris, I guess you can't see it.
You're good.
I'll describe it to you before I turn it on here. It's either a Walgreens or a CVS or it's a drugstore, and there's 3 people, the person whose camera we're looking through, and 2 other people standing here videotaping this guy filling a garbage bag with goods off the shelf. He then hops on his bicycle and rides out the door, and another guy just gets out of his way and lets him ride out the door.
And one of the guys standing right there is a security guard.
I don't know if he's a security guard.
I've heard about this story. So
I know, but if you see that badge when it zooms in, it says TSA on it.
What?
Yeah,
so maybe everybody's speculating. Everybody who I thought knew what they were talking about didn't.
Yeah, or the name of that security service is TSA. I don't know, right? But it says TSA on it. But anyway, I'm gonna play this.
What's up with TSA's hair? Is that a mohawk?
It's a man bun.
Is it?
Oh, he's a hipster.
Yeah, wearing a TSA jacket. Very trendy.
Look, the guy just gets out the way.
Yeah, so the guy fills up the trash bag, gets on his bike. The TSA guy makes a half-hearted grab at the bag of stuff he stole, but he he's just like a cursory grab.
The guy riding on a bicycle down through through the aisle. There's not a lot of room. Like if you pull on that hard at all, he's just gonna fall over.
Right.
And then the TSA agent later that day finds his uncle murdered on the street, realizes that the bicyclist was the one who did it, and vows that with great power comes great responsibility. and becomes the LA savior.
Responsibility.
Well,
He's
when I
gonna be
first
the
Spider.
next Spider-Man,
heard about this, I was like, when I first heard about this, I was like, so what if they raised it to $950? Like, it doesn't change the fact that when you steal something, they get you on camera or they stop you, and then the cops come out and they,
Right.
arrest you and whatever, right? Like, I was like, so what did they raise it? And I think that's probably what most people thought. And as I started digging into this and like looking into how laws work and what police can do at different things, it turns out that for a misdemeanor, the cop can't arrest you without a warrant or having directly observed the misdemeanor. Somebody telling you or showing you video that they did it isn't enough. You have to witness it as an officer. So what the officer has to do at that point is file the paperwork to a judge to get a warrant to then go and arrest the guy. And that shit just doesn't happen. So at most what happens is they're given a ticket and a summons to court to go and have to pay a fine and potentially go to jail or something like that. Right? The fine's $1,000, by the way. Maximum fine's $1,000. And it's like, I don't know, I forget what the duration was, but it's not very long in jail. And so if they actually bother to figure out who you are and chase you down, the most you have is a very minor crime. So, and these people are figuring it out, and they're just like, I forget if it was this article or another one, but theft has gone up unbelievable amounts since 2014 when they did this. And it's
whole chains are leaving. 17. I'm reading it right there too. It has it. Fortunately, right.
Well, 17 Walgreens closed. Yeah. The part I was going to say is, and the stores in San Francisco are spending 35 times more on security than other places in the U.S. To try and prevent this. But like a security guard seeing you do it, doesn't do anything. Now, as a security guard, you can do a citizen's arrest. And I was reading about that, and that opens you up to a ridiculous amount of legal liability.
Issues.
Yeah.
Really?
So it's just a crazy situation.
Do you know why these laws are like this? Right, because I do, because I'm about to go on a tirade about it. But I mean, do you know why they set these laws like this? Why they reduced? Yeah. All right. Well, go ahead. I won't rain on your parade, but I'm definitely going to come in swinging.
Well, tell me if it's the same thing you heard. Sure. But I heard it was because if it was something like, for the people that can't afford it or were homeless or poor or whatever, they should have the ability to get food and feed themselves and stuff like that. Like it was to, if somebody needs food, they should be able to steal it, basically, was the thought.
So that's certainly part of it. Actually, yeah. But there's, I'd say the other half of the equation, it's also a massive equity kick, which is basically saying that, okay, so what the far left, I would say, does, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, is we look at the prison system and we see that it's mostly full of African Americans and that there's a disparity there, right? And so what places like San Francisco have done partially, right? So it's also what you said, Tim, but it's also in an attempt to reduce the disproportionate amount of African Americans in jail, they reduce or inhibit the prosecution of low-level crimes. And that way, literally the goal is equity in jail, which is crazy. But to reduce the amount of Black African Americans incarcerated, they stop prosecuting, or basically make it impossible to prosecute these low-level crimes. And then the whole community suffers, right? So I mean, it's obvious, right? So regardless of what the intent was, whether it's compassionate, saying that poor people need to be able to steal so they can live, the capitalists, they can handle it, fine, whatever. The result of this is that the neighborhoods that they live in or that surround them suffer, right? So all of the lower income people who were going to that CVS or Walgreens, they no longer have a CVS or a Walgreens because we wanted to make the prisons less black, right? Or we wanted to allow people to steal when there's, food banks, and, you're in the city with the largest social service programs in the entire country, right? Yeah, I'm a tirade over. It's just It's stupidity from top to bottom.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm wrong, Chris.
I agree. No, you're right. I agree. I mean, I think sometimes there's such a conversation on when it comes to policy, finding these ways that sound really good on paper, but for example, something I can agree with on is so I don't want to defund the police. This is on the same kind of dollar as the first conversation, but it merits it. I don't want to defund the police. I do want, now personally, I would love to disarm the police, but I would love to incorporate more standards of community policing, and not just community policing of like, hey neighbor, you're my cop, but like we should have a social worker with police officers. We should have a social work response team for domestic violence, and give them a taser or something. Like, why can't we have social workers with tasers, right? Like, I don't think that's too. Right, that's not
just a funny phrase. Out. I'm not really laughing at the idea. It's just a funny phrase.
It is a funny, like tased up social workers.
Yeah.
However, a repercussion of the defund the police movement and a repercussion of this heavy anti-policing mentality is, first and foremost, one, is definitely bad cops. The system could definitely use an overhaul. We've already talked about these things.
Yes, we have, in depth.
There has been massive levels of early retirements, quittings, and now there's a lot of police forces that are actually understaffed. And what does that mean? It means that like certain crimes in certain areas are going to be overlooked. It means that response times are lower. It means that like when there is an emergency, you're not going to have a police officer there as quick as you probably should have. And that's exactly what's happening in San Fran is that, it seems that we're having unintended consequences to what we thought was going to be a good thing, whereas the root cause of the problem is maybe we need to make sure that, well, first and foremost, if people are committing serious crimes or like endangering other people, maybe do rehabilitation for them, but like don't, like just not putting somebody in prison doesn't solve anything. Just because we say, oh, we have a lower prison number, that's not a good thing, because that means that like maybe if you said we have a lower prison number because we have rehabilitated 200,000 people into a job training program or done some other like mental health service.
Rehabilitated too, not just fluff number.
Yeah, so something that happens a lot in the school system, to kind of like add one more point that I think is of interest to you guys, is that a lot of like high need schools that have traditionally high levels of suspension rates or expulsion rates, instead of suspending kids, you just don't. So like I know of people who have had experiences in these classrooms, and some of these may or may not have been my experiences, but individuals have been broken desks or thrown a desk or hit a teacher or hit another student or stabbed a student. Then the penalties for these instances were way less than what they would have been. Right. If you flip a desk in a school with a very low outburst rate, that kid's going to be suspended for good reason. They flipped the desk. Mm-hmm. Whereas I know of students that have tried to throw another kid out of the window, and they just spent the day in ISS. Because the schools don't want to say that we've expelled. Yeah, they don't want to say they expelled 20 kids. They want to say, oh, we have a 0 expulsion rate. It's like, okay, well, what does that really mean? It means that we're just allowing things to go unattended and disrupt the whole classroom or the whole school. So I think
all I got to do is hit somebody. I get to go to the space station.
Look, Tim, I got to say that expression on your face earlier was definitely like, oh, I've done that too. Oh, I did that one too, actually. Oh, yep, did that.
Oh no!
You were just going through like a biography of Tim.
I love that. I love it. Tim's elementary school experience. But no, I guess what I'm getting at is, I think the left.
I think I did stab somebody once though.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah, I didn't get in trouble for it.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, I must have been super young because I vaguely remember it. I know I didn't get in trouble for it, and I was not the instigator. I think because I'm so much bigger, and I'm kind of a quiet. Well, I used to be a lot more quiet than I am now. Guy. I got picked on a fair amount, and so I ended up having to defend myself a lot. So
wow. Well,
I was generally pretty successful.
It sounds.
That's good.
Tim pulls up a picture like, yeah, this is a graveyard I often visit. reminisce of my successes.
Like super, like it's not that he fought back; it's that he had like an Irish mafia hit out on him.
But no, I think in all seriousness, the left can do with some serious introspection on data tells us not a lot. And, sometimes we may want to put together this report that looks real cute. We've reduced prison sizes. We've reduced expulsion rates. we have less police officers. These are not good things, necessarily.
It's always... I think the lesson that the left needs to understand, I would say probably the right too, but I don't have any examples coming to mind, is that the why matters so much.
Oh, totally.
One of my favorite interviews with Jordan Peterson was when he went on Channel 4 with Kathy Newman, and she was kind of like grilling him about feminism and the gender wage gap and stuff like that. And she said, so you're saying that the wage gap... So you're saying that you wouldn't be happy if the wage gap was eliminated, and he said it would matter how it was done, right? And that's the most important thing, right? If it's done through legislative force or tyranny, that's not a good thing, right? But if it's done through the choices that men and women make on an even playing field, then that's eminently desirable, right? The why, the how, it matters so much.
Totally. Yeah, no, just like you just shared, maybe what's it called? Maybe reducing prison rates sounds like a good thing, but it's like, how did we reduce prison rates?
Right. Who are we letting go?
Yeah.
We can do all of them. How, what, why, who? Are we letting Tim out? Because not a good idea.
That's why you got to use this green screen.
Yeah, that's why we have a green screen.
Yeah. So
it's pulls it back, and it's a bunch of dudes doing pull-ups on the prison bars.
He's like, that person I stabbed, it was a bit more recent than I let on. Pulls out a prison shank.
I'm getting out tonight, boys. My last podcast. All right.
Oh no, man.
You know what we're coming up on? We're coming up on that half hour there. So
yeah.
You think it's a good time? We could probably go ahead and pivot to the USDA story, and it's more interesting than it sounds because it dips into. I mean, it touches everything. It touches, big government bureaucracy. It touches the culture war, and then it touches, the idea that if you look deeper into things, there's more to it that meets the eye. So, Tim, this was kind of your baby. I think it's probably appropriate if you start kicking this off.
Yeah, I think we both were interested in this one, but
all three of us.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I did the most research on it or not. Maybe. So this has been ongoing for a while. Back in May, I think, is when I first started hearing about the stimulus that was targeted at disadvantaged.
Yes, I'll pull up the term in a second.
Culturally disadvantaged farmers.
Yes, that's it.
Right? Yep. So here, let me get to the more recent article here and pull it up. So culturally disadvantaged farmers is what this bill was targeted at, and if you read through the articles from back in May, it says things like 0.1% of all COVID stimulus money that was targeted for farmers went to black farmers, right? So 99.9% of it went to white farmers, or I should say culturally disadvantaged, not just black. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but anyway. And so
they're socially disadvantaged.
Is that what it was, socially?
Yeah. I have the website up.
Okay. Yep. So as part of one of the packages that Biden was proposing, they were going to put out, and I forget how much it was, $4 billion, I think. Yeah, $4 billion loan forgiveness program that was targeted to people that were socially disadvantaged, and it basically was a way of just saying colored, black, Hispanic, Indian. It included multiple different races. But it didn't include whites, right? And the idea was, the reasoning behind it was that, one, they didn't receive very much of the COVID funding, it wasn't equitable, the amount that was received between cultures or races or whatever. And then another reason that I have heard said predominantly was that these groups have had a lot of struggles historically with discrimination from the USDA as far as getting loans and other things. So that was all happening in May, and then I guess a group of white farmers, I don't know what the name of the group is actually, or anything like that, sued the federal government for this, saying that it's racist, basically.
Right.
That it's racist against white farmers.
Right.
And just a couple weeks ago, I think it was sometime mid-June-ish, it came out that a judge ruled in their favor, that the bill was considered to be racist against whites, and has put a stop to it for now. Right, there's still going to be a lot more ongoing legalities, and so we'll see how it ends up turning out. But for right now, it's stopped. So, I guess that's a quick summary. What?
So, Chris, you, I know both of you did. Chris, you had you pulled up some of the history on this, right? And so it turns out, I think all of us found as we were looking into. So, I mean, this is a fantastic example of a cultural flashpoint. Tim, your green screen turned off.
Oh no!
Yeah, for those of you who can't see, he's in jail now.
Oh man, Tim, no.
Tim, no. Turn it back.
You're supposed to reveal that, man.
I'm just trying to up our representation in prison.
Oh God!
Tim just has a very, very, very progressive household. He really wanted to establish an in-house prison or as an office. I don't know, helps him focus. Some may refer to this as a dungeon, but that is not what it is actually used for.
I call it my man cave.
I saved you, Tim. Now our viewers don't think you're actually an inmate.
Oh, he's back on the farm. Yeah. So, all right. This article is a fantastic example, I think, of it's got all the elements of like a cultural flashpoint, something that I love to click on, and something that Chris loves to click on, something that The Guardian loves to write about and Fox News loves to write about. While I think the elements of the things that drive us crazy about this, or let's say get us excited politically about it, those elements do exist when you drill down, but it is certainly more complicated. So, Chris, did you? I know you said you did some research on this. Do you have the history of the USDA discrimination in the past?
A little bit. I have the interesting facts and figures that kind of wrap it up. So, a lot of what I was going to talk about, Tim covered already. But I think the biggest thing is that when we look at historical problems with amongst African American farmers comparative to white farmers, is that they were absolutely, subjected to some very serious discrimination pre-civil rights and post, mainly through what we find is that there is a disparity in loan processing, loan opportunities, land opportunities. So, for example, African American farmers have had a proven history of they'll apply for a loan, and as we all know, loans are kind of like the backbone of the American economy. If you want to start a business and you don't have capital, you get capital. If you're a farmer, loans are really serious because loans allow you to expand your farm. They allow you to get what you need to grow, and they were denied them or they were held off on getting them. And there's actually, it's very interesting. So Biden's pick, Secretary Tom Vilsack for the Agriculture Department, it's really interesting. So he's kind of coming out with some serious stuff about both Obama's administration, Trump's administration, and before that, the Agricultural Department has actually systematically suppressed discrimination complaints. So they have actually watered down their numbers and said, oh, we don't have that many discrimination complaints. There's not that many issues. When it mattered, the fact a lot of things were buried or hidden out. And so black farmers have had some serious disputes on whether or not, they were being discriminated against for loans, discriminated against for other, just regional privileges. As Tim already shared,
right?
The relief bill predominantly went to white farmers. And then additionally, when we look at certain other facts and figures on this, and this is right off. So this all comes from a Washington Post article that then had a lot of like really well put together sourcing, and this also comes from the Agricultural Department, USDA. Is that right now, for the average farm operated by an African American, it's about 100 acres compared to the national average of 440 acres. So they only have a quarter of the average land. And while a white farmer brought in about $17,000 in farm income, the average black full-time farmer was only pulling about $2,400 comparatively, per land plots or whatever. So, and for what it's worth, whereas it's like this bill is tackling African Americans and black farmers, and there's like a race component. It really hones in on an equity dynamic that really can lift up this population of farmers, and we can't it's so easy for us on the coasts to disregard the importance of farming, but farming is a make or break it for a developed country. If we don't have farmers that are doing well, we will starve and die. Farmers,
right. So
that's
two of us on this podcast don't appreciate it. Tim, however, right outside his jail cell, he sees nothing but corn for miles and miles.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Right past the barbed wire fence, right?
I'm more city boy, but it's only.
No, you stop it. There's no
10
cities in
minutes.
Ohio. You're not fooling anybody.
So I hate to do this because I don't dislike Jordan Peterson. I actually like him in a lot of different ways.
No.
But something you said earlier clicked in my head as to that is exactly how I live my life. And that is something that I think applies to this article in such a deep way, which is the why matters.
Yeah.
Right? And that's how I live my life. That's how I look at news articles. That's how I do everything. I look at something that somebody says and it says, why is it that way? How is it that way? What's underneath that? Right? And in this case, when I saw 0.1% of the COVID funding went to black farmers, I thought, why is that?
Right.
Because could it be that in today's age, a bill was written to minimize the amount of funding that went to blacks specifically? Right. Is that what happened?
Right.
And I was like, I can't imagine that's what happened.
Or, conversely, is there a racist bureaucrat nestled in the USDA who's either consciously or subconsciously influencing these loans, which would be the more...
So that's that gets to a next point that I something that changed me from this article, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so then I started looking into this 0.1%, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's only 0.1% black farmers. Right? That's not true. They're low. It's 2.5 or 3%. That's 100 times more, more than 100 times more. 0.1%. No, it's no.
It's 20 times more.
It's 20 times more. Sorry, yeah, I can't math. So it's 25
you an engineer?
times.
Oh my God,
no,
this country.
Not anymore. Now I'm in finance.
Now he just deals with money, guys. It's okay.
It's 25 to 30 times more, right? So there's a big disparity there. So why is that? And it took me a while to figure it out, but Chris actually threw the numbers out that answer the question, which is, there are 2.5% or 3% of farmers are black, but a significant portion of black farmers produce significantly less and on significantly less land than white farmers.
Right.
So I guarantee you the bill wasn't written to say, if you're a farmer, you get X amount of dollars. It was probably something similar to how small business loans and other business bailout loans and other things are, which is you apply based on your debt,
the size
your loan,
of your company, which would be the size of your land or your holdings.
Well, yeah, and whatever these were, if they were loan forgiveness, well, if you're a smaller farm, you're going to have a smaller loan to forgive, right? Or vice versa. So it probably was that, and I'm not trying to say that the fact that black farmers only make up 0.1% of farming output is a good thing. That isn't the point I'm trying to make here. But as far as this COVID bill only applying to 0.1% of black farmers is because it equitably applied to output. It didn't racially divide anything, right? But one of the things that this made me look into was, what is the history of racism against farmers, right? Because throughout all these articles you see, black farmers used to make up, 40%, 30%, 20%, whatever it is of farming, and they've had a significant decline.
And it's dwindled,
Right. So what caused this, right? Why is that? And I kept reading that, like, well, it was racist policies. It was systemic racism that caused this. And I'm looking at policies. I'm trying to look up laws. I'm like, there's nothing. I'm like, there's nothing that is like, oh, we can't give blacks loans. We can't do. And I actually had an epiphany from this, looking into this, that
epiphany.
What'd I say?
I think you said epitome, but I have you pretty low. I don't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm correcting.
No. If I said it wrong, epiphany.
Okay.
I meant epiphany. From this, that applies to all of the systemic racism stuff, right? Which is, they sued the USDA for racism.
Yep.
But not because of the policies. It's because the representatives of the USDA, the people that were responsible for determining if you get a loan or not, were racist, right? These people were disproportionately denying blacks loans, or taking significantly longer to process their loan applications, or only approving them for significantly less than what an equivalent white farmer would get. And these aren't like just guesses. Like, this was proven, and that's what happened with the Pigford versus somebody case, right?
So, and that, I'm sorry, are you saying that it was proven that there was disparity in the allocation of loans? Based on race?
That's pretty
significantly but not because of the USDA policies, which this is my epiphany, right? Is when I think of systemic racism, when I hear these people, everyone saying systemic racism, I'm always thinking like policy. What is the policy driving this systemic racism? And I'm like, I don't see any. Like, I don't see where this policy is making this racist. And this is an example that I finally got to see through that a little bit and see, oh, okay, it's not the policy. It's the freedom that's given to the people that are making decisions.
To make complex decisions.
And they are racist, or acting in a racist manner, right? Like, whatever, they're disproportionately.
Well, Chris, that's where maybe they're not directly racist, especially since these people are probably working in Washington D.C. and they're probably liberal Democrats.
No. But I think what Tim's saying is
these are local loan agents.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
okay.
I mean, dude. I mean, like, look, I can tell you right now. I mean, we're in the process of getting a house. It sucks. Like, do you have any the level of stress? Like, they literally, because my name changed a bunch of times, our mortgage thing was almost like, it was actually almost delayed, and my name was changed because of foster care. It's like, holy shit. Like, and I had to, they actually wanted me to prove if I was a citizen or not. And so, I kind of got a little snappy. But
I thought you were maybe trying to hide from the CIA.
I had to prove I was a citizen too, bro.
Well, we fixed it. We fixed it real quick, but it was just like, whoa. But like little things like that. As long as your
birth certificate's not from Hawaii, you're good.
Yeah. But no, like, these things happen. But that's a very minor example. When we're talking about local loan agents in the South, and like, I don't know, you're going to be running into like these dynamics of racism and prejudices, and like, there is been what's it called? We have seen a proven history, especially pre-civil Civil Rights Act, but also post-Civil Rights Act, that African American farmers, black farmers, have been denied loans. They've had also their loans delayed, which obviously, as you can imagine, causes problems. Additionally, what we see is happening, and this is, again, coming from a few different sources I can share afterwards, a lot of black farmers, for some reason, just don't have like clear titles to their lands for whatever reason, through their history, for how it's been passed down to them. And so what ends up happening is a lot of black farmers have actually become ineligible for USDA loans for livestock or covering the cost of planting, whereas white farmers are able to qualify for these. And farming is very much a loan business. Like, you take out a loan, you produce crops, you pay it for a loan, you have profit.
Yeah, you're It's because your output is generally it's at the end of the season, so you need something to smooth over the bumps of your income.
Yeah, and unless you're like some mega farm, and the reality is you're not going to be able to do this. And also, when we really get in the weeds of this, you run into it's not as simple anymore as you save your seed grain from year to year, where it's like you plant a crop, you then also not only harvest the crop, you'll harvest the seeds from it, you reuse those seeds, boom, that's your seed grain. You also now because of GMOs and whatnot. Every year you need to purchase.
Are ineligible for regrowth.
Yeah,
they genetically made it so that they're not like that they don't reseed themselves, and you have to buy their product
just
again.
Big and fat and juicy and full of nutrients.
Well, they specifically made it. You have to buy their seed. Yeah.
It's great stuff, by the way. GMOs.
Fantastic.
Look what it did to me. I'm 6'3".
That's the hormones in the milk.
Yeah. No, I have 4 arms now.
I heard a specific instance in one of the articles I was reading, Chris. Not to cut you off, but this kind of goes into your story of where a farmer was told that his loan was approved, went out and bought all the cattle and stuff, and then the guy came back and was like, "Nah, I was kidding, man. It's denied."
That's the worst.
Oh my god!
Wow.
So I mean, I'm laughing, but not out of humor. Right?
No, it's just out of
terrible.
Like, absurdity.
So, but because of all that, right? The government said, yeah, this was racist. They had to deal with this, and so, they approved. So to get into some of the background, Chris, and I'll let you tell some of this because I know I've been talking a lot. They awarded settlement to farmers that were racially discriminated
against, yeah.
Right? Like, but there were some stipulations there. Chris, are you super familiar with the Pickford stuff, or do you want me to talk about it more?
No, you can dive into the Pickford stuff. I will just say one thing, just to kind of help preface this. I feel, a lot of times on all sides of the aisle, we have these notions that things are relatively more utopian than they really are. And the hard truth here is that we have there's racist bankers. A lot of racist bankers in the South, has some serious prejudices still really rooted into it. And so while we may say, hey, are we sure this is happening? It's like, no, it's happening. It's been categorized. But I'll kick it back to Tim. Cataloged.
Well, hold on. So let me just interject here real quick. So I've kind of been quiet, I suppose, because quote unquote my side kind of loses out on this, right? Because we generally say no, racism isn't a factor. Things are way better than they used to be. All that kind of stuff. So, but I would push back a little bit.
Well, this is all from the '80s. The Pickford is from.
Yeah, I understand. Right? It's even sure there was some. They also do allege stuff all the way up through the Obama era, and I'm sure through under the Trump era as well, that there was still some discrimination and that they were being ignored or this, that, and the other thing. Like, for example, that stimulus check, like all that stuff where they still alleged that there was discrimination there. And I mean, listen, I didn't forget the point I was going to make. I promise. I suppose. Look, so
we should have named the podcast "I Forget the Point."
I know. It's real bad. That's bad of me. See, like I did. Jordan Peterson's the best at this. Like where he'll go on literally like a tree branch, and he'll be talking about like 10 degrees of separation from the thing that he was talking about, and then he'll tie it back in. The dude's a beast. Anyways, I did want to talk a little bit. So there's a whole bunch of things that we don't acknowledge could be the thing, right? So we were just talking about discrimination in banking. We're talking about discriminations in these, right? And so while people on the right will acknowledge that there especially was and definitely still is racism in certain places, I think a lot of the times we sort of uncritically accept that racism was the cause of disparity, right? A lot of times we even start with there is disparity, therefore there is racism. And we don't like consciously do that math, but that's kind of how it goes, right? So, well, there's disparity, therefore there must be racism. basically all I'm going to say is that before we continue down what we were talking about, I tried looking into a lot of these different numbers that I see. I tried looking into a lot of the cases. And the problem is that without doing a case-by-case analysis, this is very hard to actually quantify. So, for example, a problem that I might have with this, maybe, potentially, right, maybe not so much back in the 80s, is that we don't know what the state of the applicants were when they asked for this, right? So if I could analogize this really quick, there was a study of people being pulled over in New Jersey a while back, and there was allegations that it was racist because there was disparity, right? More black people were getting pulled over, so disparity, therefore racism. And then when they did a study, it turns out that slightly more black people were speeding, and that it was actually per demographic about the right amount of people were getting pulled over. And so the question is it the same thing with this, right? So are people who are applying for these loans, is it just that that the black people aren't qualified as much? And I'm not saying that as in a racist thing, like black people just don't qualify for loans. Like they're, as we all know, they're historically economically underprivileged. So if they have bad credit resulting from historical, oppression, or whatever it is, whatever reason, where they they don't come from families with good credit, or they've been close to the poverty line their whole life, whatever it is, like I have not been able to find, and I don't think it's necessarily possible for us to find because we don't have this data. Was it just that those applicants actually didn't qualify, right? Their credit was lower. They to the bank who's just looking at raw statistics, that they were going to lose out on those loans. And I'm not saying there probably wasn't racism mixed in there, right? That was, the 80s were only 20 years after the civil rights movement. I know I think it's gotten much better since then. But go ahead.
Well, if I can, before Tim kicks it off with the court case, I do just want to say I understand the kind of like intention behind saying, let me take a step back and look at this from all angles. If I'm just looking at this as a cut and dry application thing, was there just a disparity? And I get the inclination towards doing that, but loan disparity and loan disbursement amongst the races in our country is like really well documented. That is one thing that above all else, if there's one thing I can really affirm on anything else where discrimination becomes the most prevalent, it's on the ability for people of color to get loans. This becomes, without going down a rabbit hole, this becomes extremely hyper-prevalent in car sales as well. So, for example, I took a student to go buy a car, and the student is African-American. And I was dressed kind of like a scrub that day, but I was helping her buy a car. I was going there to help negotiate, all that good stuff. And it was actually at a dealer that I've had incredible experiences with. Like, it's where I bought my car. I've helped other people go to that dealer, and I've gone with them because they've always had great service and helped them buy their cars. And so this was the first time I went with someone who was a person of color. And ready for this, we gave them the budget, we gave them the price, we sent all the numbers. Like, we have $4,000 to put down right now. We're looking at, this is the price range of the car we're looking at, all that.
Right, 4,000 is a good amount.
That's a huge amount to put down.
Yeah.
Good credit. The student has good credit. We already know. I was willing to co-sign, but only if it was the last resort, and they knew I had good credit because I bought a car from them. We go out, and ready for this. First car they show us, he goes, this car, $10,000. It's a great car, all this stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So I go online to that car dealership's damn website, and I pull up the car, and it's listed for $7,300. And I go, sir, this car is literally listed for like $2,500, $3,000 less than what you're showing me. He's like, oh, but that's the internet. I'm like, no, but it's your fucking parking lot. Like, and I'm like, it's your website. He's like, oh, yeah, well, I guess I'll honor that. And then he shows another car, does the same thing. I pull it up on the website. I'm like, you're literally doing the same thing again. And he's like, oh, well, he goes, my manager doesn't want me showing the accurate numbers. And he doesn't want it. You know how it is. And I'm like, no, I don't know how it is.
Wait, Chris, okay, but did you, all right, hold on now, Chris. Again,
that's a race thing.
No, I don't think it is.
No.
Did you check that? No, I'm going to tell you with 99% certainty, because one of my best friends in the Navy was a used car salesman. They do that to every single car.
No, but this was a new. This was but this was like a licensed Hyundai dealership, brand new cars.
That $3,000 was what he was trying to make commission on. He was about to make all that money in commission, and I guarantee you it has nothing to do with race.
It does though, because that was one example I'm giving anecdotal that actually backs up like people of color. Everybody gets finessed, and it's not always an explicit thing either. Everybody gets finessed buying a car. We know that people of color get finessed. Well, I don't either, because I'm an absolute piece of shit when I go buy.
If you go in and you tell them I'm putting this much down, this is how much I'm going to spend, you give them all that information up front, you're getting finessed, my friend.
Thank you.
Well, but that's
your problem was saying that you could put down that much up front.
But we also
they can afford it.
We could have put down more. We just said those numbers. But anyways, what I'm saying is that
you should have said I can give you this toothpick.
You don't tell them shit. That's what you do.
I'm saying,
you go in there and say, I want this car. It's the cheapest price I can get. Oh, that's too much. I'm out of here. And then they stop you halfway down the lot and tell you that they can give it to you for less.
Sure. But what I'm saying is, we do know documented wise that African Americans and black individuals experience significantly higher levels of finessing at car dealerships than white people. So if we were to go in, maybe I would get fleeced for $2,000, but the student was getting fleeced for $3,000. That is well documented. This is data you can't.
Where is that documented? That's an interesting.
Yeah, I can provide it. I have it.
All right, so this is one of the things where Chris isn't doing the thing that I do. I'm like, you're just gonna have to trust me for now. I'll show you later.
I'm not trying to say he's wrong. I'm just curious to see.
No.
I would like to see these studies, Chris. I genuinely would.
I have a whole book on it. I'll send out to you guys.
And Tim can't read. Does it have pictures?
Audio book or I'm out.
Yeah.
The book has sources that I can take and send to you guys.
I think that, before I get into that particular legal case again, I thought where you were going to take this was that people of color really have a harder time getting loans, which we've kind of mentioned a few times. And
no, it's true.
And that I logically, even without seeing data, would agree with, because that's almost like that self-fulfilling prophecy of until you have a good credit score, you can't get a loan, and until you can get a loan,
until you take out credit, you
get a car, you can't get a good job that you can drive to, right? So it's one of those things where you need one to get the other. In a way, they kind of work together. So I get that when you start from a disadvantaged place, 50, 80 years ago, whatever, and that's just continued to drive through your family history, that you really can struggle to get out of that loop. But Nate, to your point,
yes.
Interestingly, in this Pigford case, right, you said, we'd have to look at every single case individually. That's one of the biggest gripes about this case, especially from the black community, was that was part of the requirement to get paid. You had to prove that you were discriminated against.
Yeah.
By providing a case of a white farmer that was in a similar situation to you that wasn't discriminated against. Right? That was part of this of the Pigford case's settlement. So that's one of the gripes. Another gripe was it took them forever to try and process this stuff. Right? That they weren't able to get through these, and a lot of people were left behind because they didn't get their applications in time, and they had to get the application in through a lawyer, obviously, and things like that. And so I started looking into it a bit, and interestingly, when this case first was brought to the courts, they were expecting roughly 2,000 or so people were eligible. I believe 70 or 75,000 people applied. Or ended up, and there was at least 20-something thousand that were part of the main group.
Dude, that was probably every single black farmer in the country.
Right. So if you've prepared for 2,000 and then you get 20,000 or potentially 60,000, right? You're not prepared to be able to do this in time. So that was part of what happened, and they ended up doing a second round, right? The people that didn't get their didn't get paid out the first time, they refiled, basically had another court case. The court's like, we got you. We'll do it a little differently. But one of the big complaints against the first one was, as a black farmer, right, you had to prove that you were treated disproportionately compared to a white farmer. I don't know if it said white, but another farmer in the same situation, and they were still able to pay out over 16,000 claims.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that being said, like, they put the onus of proof on the farmers.
Yeah, but so I've been thinking about this. Do you have a better solution? Like, where should the onus be? Right. So you know what I mean?
I'm not trying to comment
right
per se on that stipulation. Like, I get it. Right. Like, you don't want to you don't want to open it up to be like, oh, just come and let us know if you feel like you were discriminated against, and we'll just give you a bunch of money. You need to have some sort of proof, and unfortunately, that's generally how legal cases work, right?
Right.
A lot of people.
The downside being, obviously, it's expensive. Not everybody can do it. I mean, they're applying for loans, So, like, I understand where the left would have a problem with that, but I don't see a better solution. I don't know, Chris, if you think there is.
Yeah, it's a tough
I think, if anything, just because there have been so many people that were able to prove that there was proof of, and it was held up in a court, I think it just goes to show, like, there was, like, legitimate discrimination.
Yeah, right.
And that's what I'm still, like, I mean, as
my
we
big
discussed,
takeaway, right?
That was
my
all
big takeaway.
Individual agents, right? Which is the biggest problem there, right? So, like, I would be sympathetic if it was the high-level bureaucrats at the USDA that were proven to be the ones that were kind of in charge of this, which would be what Tim was talking about before, more of like policy than anything. But the problem is that it is all of those individual loners, especially in the South, that prove to be racist, and like you can't. It's a feel-good policy to make broad prescriptions based off of the actions of individuals.
Well, I think this is rather exactly where government's supposed to step in, is to fill the shoes of, like, all right, we've noticed inequities, let's step in and do something about it and try to remedy some of this. And that can be it's also not a zero-sum game, right? It's not like that white farmers aren't getting aid. It's that black farmers have been denied aid, and so let's provide something to the black farmers while everybody is still eligible for aid. Like, it's not like the white farmers aren't getting. If anything, the white farmers should be mad at Trump for when we went into the soybean war with China, and then all of a sudden, like, boom, like, all these farmers were, like, losing massive levels of income.
They were mad at him, by the way. Even when he tried to get them aid.
But then he pacified them because he's like, all right, here's a farmer subsidy, yeehaw. Like,
I read articles saying it didn't work, but that's neither here nor there.
To that point, Chris, I mean, you're kind of coming back to the current situation, right?
Yeah.
I think, for me, if they would have simply just not made it a COVID package and just made it its own thing, I probably would have been a little less put off by it, right?
That's kind of how government works, though. I mean,
if they'd have said, look, like, we're doing a round 3 Pigford thing, like, look, we still feel like there's been a lot of disadvantaged people that were taken advantage of or discriminated against or whatever, and we're trying to help out. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But when they come out and say, oh, it's because the COVID bill didn't give enough money to other people, now it's just saying, hey, it's not equitable. And I'm not a fan of equity. I don't think that just because you're part of one group and somebody else is part of another group that you should have the same amount of stuff or the same amount of anything, right? Your situation determines where you're at. And that's why I dug into the numbers, because I was like, really? Could the bill have been discriminatory enough that it only gave, 1/25th or 1/30th of the aid to black farmers in some way? Was it written in a way that happened? And no, it was written in a way that it gave it based on production. Like, your farm is worth $10 million. You get 1% of that as a loan. Well, your farm's only worth $10,000. You get 1% of that as a loan. Should they both get the same amount of a loan? No, that doesn't make sense, right? So I think for me, where I don't agree with the current bill is how it's targeted. It's like, oh, well, we need to re-up our COVID aid. And it shouldn't be based on that. It should be based on, hey, we're trying to fix things that happened in the past. I know we can't fix them. There were things that happened that weren't right, and so this is what this is for. And to your comment, Nate, I'm actually more sympathetic when it's the individuals that are causing the problem rather than less.
Yeah,
because
absolutely. If I came across any other way, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, because it's much easier to prove when it's the head guy that's racist or when it's the policy that's racist, and you can fix that. Mm-hmm. When you're going to a bank as an individual and you run up against a guy that's racist and he just straight shuts you down because of race, there's a lot less you can do. It's a lot harder to prove, right?
Right,
and so I put myself in the shoes of these guys that are walking in.
Yeah.
And may have every right to get a loan, and they're just trying to run a business and get their family fed, and et cetera, and they're getting shut down because of race. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, like it goes without saying, or it should go without saying, that obviously when you find those individual cases of racism, like I'm ecstatic when it gets shut down. Right. And I think unfortunately that's the best scenario that we have yet so far to remedy this, which is the class action lawsuits or the individual litigation, right? Because it is federally illegal to discriminate, right? You cannot do it, and that's a fantastic outgrowth of the 1960 civil rights bills, and and I'm glad for that. And it sucks that for a long time, and less so now. I know the left maybe not believe this, but there's certainly less. For a long time, it sucks that there was still a lot of racism. I wouldn't call it systemic racism, but it was cultural racism in the South and even some places in the North. That abated a bunch, and so hopefully it's better now, and hopefully as we learn to see less color, it will get better and better and better as we just integrate to being Americans. I think kind of what Tim said,
sneaking in the color blindness right there.
Yeah, I got him, man. It's no other way to be. Just to elaborate on what Tim said just a little bit. Again, there's a reason why the federal government cannot discriminate based on race. And regardless of whether it's trying to help somebody or hurt somebody, I think we need to adhere to that principle even when it hurts. Like even when it's something where, let's pretend we all came together and acknowledged that there was USDA discrimination, right? Actual USDA discrimination. That right there should be litigated even then to the individuals who were hurt by it, right? Even then you should not discriminate based on class, right? You would say, all right, these particular people were discriminated against on the basis of their race. We're rectifying that situation now, and now that situation is rectified. Other than that, not discriminating based on race it's a principle that should be adhered to, and I'm for it, even when it's going to, in the future when the white population is less than all the other population, that's still going to be the principle. Do not discriminate based on race, either to help or to hurt.
For what it's worth, there was a missed opportunity here to just kind of, there's ways around these things. You can always just say, like, we're going to provide $4 billion towards eligible farmers. The eligibility is no clear title on your farm. Your farm is less than 400 acres. Like they could have just done that. Like if your farm is 200 acres or less. Like
right, but I gotta say, Chris, like
farmers get pissed.
Even this, like, so you got to be careful about that because it's still legal to do those sneaky things, right? Because that's the positive side of sneaky that's helping black people. And like the example of the negative part of that sneaky was implementing literacy tests back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? It's reverse Jim Crow. It's to help. I get it, but it's still like illegal because you're
requiring an ID to help when you go to vote.
It would help white
like
farmers
requiring an ID when you go to vote.
Stop it.
I'm just bringing.
It's like 70-something% of Americans want that.
I'm pulling a Jordan Peterson here, pulling 10 degrees of separation across.
All right, so I think we had a pretty good conversation on that. We've got like 11 minutes left. Let's do. I'm sorry. Was that horrible math? That was horrible math. It's more than that. It's like 21 minutes.
21. Welcome to my world.
Let's do some BS philosophy with Nathan here. So again, I'm gonna apologize because this I do want to talk about this, but as amicable as we've been, this one is sort of pointed straight at Chris, and I cleared it with him before the podcast, and he's obviously no blushing daisy, so he could take it anyways. But I do feel bad macking on people. But
all right, I'm on Chris's side then.
Yeah, go ahead, take his side. You probably will be for some of it, actually. I think the two of you might be pretty close on this one. Or maybe you won't. This is a problem that I do uniquely think is part of the left, and let me lay it out for you. So recently, I watched a little bit of a Jordan Peterson podcast, and I didn't see too much of it, but I did see one part where he said he said the phrase "every standard is a judge," right? Which kind of got me thinking. It's like, okay, every standard that we have as a society is something that we all feel measured up against, right? And we all stack ourselves up against the standards that society holds for us, and they judge us, right? And they judge us in ways that makes us feel bad, and it feels, like we're not holding up to stuff. So let me go through. I compiled like a basic list of things where I see this, and then I see how we've responded to it. So, like, for example, and I talked to both of you about this particular one. There's back in the early 2000s, let's say historically, body standards have been basically the superhero body standard, right? It's super thin. It's for women. It's long legs. It's it's a whole bunch of characteristics for women. But it basically super thin. It may be unhealthily thin. For men, it's super muscular. It's tall. It's you got to have the jawline, maybe a cleft chin, a whole bunch of stuff like that. So there's these standards of beauty. And they stand in judgment of all of us, and we all fall short of these standards, right? Because the standard is Superman and Superwoman, or whoever's walking the catwalk.
They're also impossible. They're impossible standards,
right? Impossible body standards, and one would even say like oppressive body standards is some of the terms I've heard. But then like this goes on to other things than that. Like that's the most universally understandable example. There's I've heard some crazy stuff as crazy as like a hard work ethic is supposed to be a product of the white colonialist mindset, and so we have to get rid of the idea of working hard every day because that's oppressive to black people who aren't part of the colonialist mindset. There's stuff like gender roles. Gender roles is probably one of the most prevalent standards that we disdain as a culture, right? So the idea of
now,
a man,
not 50 years ago.
What's that?
Said we disdain them now. We didn't 50 years ago.
No, correct. Right. A lot of these standards, were generally something that we held in the past, and they're not now. But so the gender roles would be, the man standing at the head of the household. He generally makes most of the tough decisions. He goes out into the world. He does all the work. He comes back, makes the money, and provides for the household. The wife stays at home, minds the children, minds the house, that kind of stuff. Gender roles, right? And we find those judge our new millennial lifestyles, right? And it's not just us. Our parents felt judged by it, and the generations before them and whatnot. But then one more example, let's say grades, right? So this is something that I've been hearing as well. So SAT scores are starting to be thrown out by the left as standards for getting into colleges because black people do worse on them, right? And they do worse because their schools are bad, right? And most of them are poorer than white people, right? So the standard of being able to academically perform to get into an academic institute has been thrown out because it stands in judgment of black people, and we don't like that. So
can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, go for it. I'm basically done with my spiel anyways. We have these standards, and we, as Americans, we want to throw them out because they stand in judgment of people, especially minorities or women, and we just want to get rid of them because it makes us feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, like this is more on the topic of the SAT score thing. I never understood that really. If I'm a business, if I'm an educator, I'm a business, I'm a university, and somebody wants to pay me to attend my school, come on in, right? Like, what McDonald's did you ever go to that was like, sorry, your cholesterol's too high. We're not going to give you a cheeseburger. Like, what is that? That's some bullshit.
Yeah, there's a difference, though. It's limited seats, right, Chris?
I think it's a mixture of things. I can probably give some clarity.
Well, I get like the Harvards and the Stanfords and the very
sure.
reputable and desirable schools being able to say, hey, these are the students we want to take. But that's still a problem for me and for anybody, right? Like, I'm not getting into Harvard or Stanford with my SAT scores and my GPA when I was coming out of college. I wasn't getting in there, right? So that's not a racial thing per se.
It's
but why is there a limit for any college? Like, at some point, you're going to be able to go to college, right?
I can break that down a little bit. That's actually right where I work. I work in the college sphere, so I can provide some expertise on this. It's two ways. So on one end, colleges can't just accept anybody because there's actually certain standardization
federal funding crap.
Yeah, so it's like if you just accept anybody and then you end up. So for example, one of the biggest things is that if more than, I believe it's 10%, it might be 20%. It's not past 20, but let's just say it's 15 for the sake of this argument. If more than 15% of individuals who have attended your college default on their student loans, you will lose federal funding entirely.
What the shit?
Yep. So it is.
I like that.
What the fuck?
Yep.
I like it.
So it's very, very important for state universities to ensure. Now, community colleges are funded differently because there's no admissions problem. But for state universities, there's a huge responsibility to make sure that not only are you accepting people who can graduate, but you provide a good education that actually gets them employed. That's why colleges actually invest in career centers, and recruiters and all that. Now, the other side of this, that kind of helps answer that a little bit. Why SATs are becoming a more fluid standard. SATs aren't so much...
Are they not becoming less of a standard? I thought they were.
They're much more less of a standard at this point. But so one of the reasons why the argument is on the SAT thing, I'll make this quick just to throw this in. SATs are not so much a measurement of your actual knowledge, but rather your capability and resourcefulness. And so if you come from a really bad
it's an
school...
IQ test, basically.
It's barely that.
It's a study test.
It's a study test. So let's say, though, and it's also a test of means. So let's say, that's why we know if the average SAT score is a 900, that means that people that scored above a 900, their scores actually will go down, and those who scored less than the 900 will actually go up because it forces itself towards a normal distribution. If you are in a high school where the average SAT score, let's say, is really bad, like a 650, a 700, it's almost the bottom, and then you pump out an 850, 900, that is a sign to a college that's like, okay, given the resources that they had, they scored well above the average of their area. Therefore, we can presume that they will do really well in our college because they're already above the average of where they are. So that's kind of like... that's why
done properly. I actually have no problem with that. Actually,
that's just to kind of answer that. I mean, that's really it gets lost in translation, but that's how colleges will perceive SAT scores now. It's not that we'll accept some students with a lower SAT score than the average class, but only because they did exceptionally better than the average individual at their school, and that tells a lot about that person, their potential. And that's what it comes down to. It's like, okay, now obviously you can't just accept someone that's nowhere near the mark of college or collegiate, right? Like, if you're getting into Yale with a lower SAT score, you still got to be able to do like pre-calc. But if you're not rocking a perfect SAT score, but you scored a 1,000 in a school district that like the average SAT is a 700, just because you don't have 1,100 or higher doesn't mean anything. It's like, oh shit, this person's great at Yale.
Well, so I hear, and I don't have the studies to back this up right now. We can hold me to it to try to go find these studies. But what I've heard actually, so I'm aware that we're starting to weight those distributions, and I'm actually in favor of that to a degree. I still wouldn't normalize it just based on the school's performance, because what I hear, part of the problem is that, right, so this is kind of an equity move, right? And when I say kind of, I mean, I'm saying it's probably the most sensical equity move. Like, you're trying to actually find the best people from black high schools who are underperforming historically and trying to get them to the universities that they can succeed in. I'm seeing that. I've seen that part of the problem is that it looks like maybe we're overdoing it too much, because like the rates of dropout among black applicants who are let in under this program is like astronomically high. Like it's too high. Like, as in we're granting seats to people who can't function with it because they didn't get that education. Right? I'm not saying that if they'd gone to the same school as the white person who got that 1100, that they wouldn't be able to do it. The problem is that we're trying to control for an academic history that they didn't get, but still doesn't allow them to do well because they didn't have that academic history. And so you're giving a seat to a person who can't use it as well.
I feel like that'll probably adjust. Like, they'll probably get that figured out. But I'm thinking of this completely anecdotally. I don't have any studies or data or anything, but imagine being in a school that just isn't very good. The teachers aren't good. Your colleagues that you're in school with aren't very good. Your fellow students, and you're able to just crush it with no effort at all, right? And you're underperforming most people at other non-shit schools, right? And now you get led into something like a Yale or Stanford, where most of the people there are working their ass off. They studied all through high school. They've developed these skills of studying and time management and different techniques to learn and all of that. And you're thrown in with these guys and expected to perform. And you don't have a lot of those skills. You are extremely capable. You are very intelligent. You have all of the DNA, if you want to say it that way, right? You have all of the
you have the biology.
You just don't. You may not have developed the skills necessary to maintain your performance or even be able to perform at all. Or you may not be interested, right? Like, you get into Yale, you're like, fuck yeah, I'm going to go to Yale. And you get there and you're like, this is a 180 from the culture that I just lived my entire life in. Right?
Yeah,
there's probably a lot of I'm just saying, like, you don't feel comfortable. I'm not saying that you don't want, so I think there's probably a lot of non-tangibles that are factoring into that dropout rate, if I had to just guess from an anecdotal standpoint.
I have a very good friend who went to one of the prestigious Ivies and was very, very much out of place and considered transferring for a bit of time. And they did, and they followed through. They got their degree. But that is something that they shared with a lot of their other peers, because it's like, imagine, growing up like Hispanic or African American or Black, and like even a middle class, even one of us, like middle class, and now you're 17.
I was going to say, I would be just as out of place. Well, right. But even I'd be 75 as out of place as them.
But like even and especially throw yourself back when you were 17, 18 years old, angsty little teenager, and like still have acne probably, and now when you go to Ivy League schools,
the acne goes away.
Well, no, and then you're surrounded by people that have yachts, like not just a couple people, but a lot of people
tied over their shoulders.
That's intimidating. That's like as a 17-year-old. More likely than not, you're not going to be able to break through that. Now, as an adult, like, sure, like I can hold my own at Harvard. I can break through those molds. Like, not a problem, because it's like I have more to lean on. I have more to stand on. I have developed my own like social capital. But as a 17-year-old, oh my gosh, I would have drowned.
Yeah. So I mean, look. All right, so I mean that's a good conversation right there. It's like, okay, so maybe that standard, maybe it was arbitrary in the first place, right? So, and I would actually say that's what the left excels at, right? Now, I think you're also really bad at it because you do it everywhere and you do it poorly everywhere. But occasionally, this hammer in search of a nail might hit something, right? So where I was conceding, I kind of like, okay, so you're trying to control for somebody's poor experience. You're trying to actually get those people who do have the capacity for being in the school, and I do applaud that. I think you're probably going a little too far based on that study that I did see, and hopefully I'll bring up, or maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. So hopefully this program is helping African Americans out. So that's one standard. I mean, what about one of these other ones? Like we can do the appearance one, right? So like if you've noticed in the last 2 or 3 years, Target now has fat mannequins, right? And they've got, short ones, tall ones. You've got every kind of mannequin in Target, right? And this one's a little bit more lighthearted, but it's like the supermodel.
I just want to say I have some friends that would prefer the fat mannequin.
Really?
Saying. Yeah.
No. I prefer.
Okay, so I mean, look. I know you're kind of joking.
I mean, I think
no, I'm saying it in a joking way, but the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is that I think there are standards based on majority perception or majority interest or what, but there will always be for at least for physicalness and attractiveness and things, a variety of people that like different things. I have friends specifically that they are more attracted to heavyset and very heavyset women than anything else. That is what they're attracted to, right? That's the thing.
I think too, where it comes down to is like, Nate, you kind of almost like the logic almost undoes itself based on how you describe it. Is like, if we're talking beauty standards,
right.
I think we need to almost reverse a little bit. Like I said before the podcast, like it's just representation is finally becoming something that we're caring about at a higher level. Like beauty standards. Look at like, I don't know, there was a viral meme a while back. Like, the dude who plays Wolverine would literally have to dehydrate himself. Like, Hugh Jackman wouldn't drink water for like
Huge Jackman
wouldn't drink water for like 2 days. That's why it looks like he has his veins bursting out of him. Like Steve Rogers, the Captain America actor, obviously Steve Rogers is the fictional name. Chris Evans literally like fractured his shoulder because his suit was so fucking tight because they wanted to bring out muscles. Like, we have actually created completely impossible beauty standards because the only way to get them is by starving or drowning.
Let's chicken and egg this, though, right? Are those things happening because they're trying to create standards, or are they trying to conform or meet the best of standards that people actually like or want? Right.
Well, I think let me not
like
even.
We
just
find these muscles and veins attractive, therefore they do these things.
Sure, right. But they're not real. They're not. They're meant for a movie, and that movie is as fake as real. I promise you,
dude. A buddy of mine. But I'm not. I don't want to be that guy. I know a guy.
Isn't real, guys.
This is no bullshit. A buddy of mine has veins that just pop out all over his fucking body.
I believe it, and some people have that. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's nothing wrong with some good representation. Like, I like when I go to Target and I see mannequins that actually look like the people around me and myself. Like, it's a good feeling. It's like, it's not intimidating, and it probably makes Target a ton of money.
What about this? So we're probably maybe standards isn't the best word, and I'll twist it a little bit, and I'll let you guys go with it, and then we'll maybe end with this. What about an ideal? Right. So, what? And let me just couch that really quick. So, I'm not saying that as an ideal, right, something to strive for. I'm not saying that we should look like Chris Rogers, just as I don't think that women should be supermodel skinny, right? But as an ideal, you provide something to reach towards, right? So you reach for the star. You're never going to get to the star, but you reach for the star is the saying, right? And it's the same thing where, like, when you get really deep into the psychology of religion, God is the ultimate man, like Jesus was the ultimate man. You'll never be Jesus, but that's something to reach towards. So I would ask the both of you, like, I mean, yes, this is mostly lighthearted and funny at this point, but are we losing something by dispensing with the ideal? No, I mean, so also not conflate, like, I don't think it's fair to be honest. Like, even if other podcasters have used that as an analogy, it's like, yeah, like Jesus was born perfect because Jesus was like the Son of God, and like we strive for that ideal even though we may not reach it and we can't reach it. But that's because it's in a very, very spiritual connotation. Like that's like religion. When it comes to like humanity, the ideals of yeah, we should try to be healthy. Like, I'm not saying don't be healthy. Right.
I'm also not saying like don't not work hard, but there's something to be said, like, yeah, people shouldn't have to be slaving away 80, 90, 100 hours a week. People shouldn't consider, like, and I'm someone that's done that, and I did it so other people don't have to do that. Like, my employees do not work those crazy hours. They work hard hours, but they're not working like the 80, 90 hours. And that's what I hope for. Like, some people, let's let it be a choice, right? But let's not glorify it. Let's not make these like unrealistic expectations, because then, when we make life this unreachable ladder, you climb really high and then you fall down and you get real hurt, metaphorically, at the spiritual level. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people say like, oh yeah, I strive for greatness, and they already were great. They're already doing some great stuff. They don't get to where they were supposed to be. They become really bitter and like terrible people because so I think actually, by having these ideals, we create large failures that people don't understand why they hit that failure, and that creates bitterness and resentment and anger. And I think we can do good by setting more realistic things. Like, yeah, strive for good things, eat healthy, eat a salad, right? Have a therapist, go to the gym, work hard.
Sounds like an impressive standard, Chris.
Find a job you love, but or at least can enjoy, build a family, right? But realizing that, like, we don't need to be looking like Hugh Jackman to or striving to be Hugh Jackman to feel happy in life.
I'm just glad that son of a bitch is in Australia. I would be divorced if he was trying to take my wife.
You know, like, Australians are like the second highest paid demographic in the United States. Sorry, your turn, Tim.
So I actually think a lot of what Chris is saying is the problem.
Ooh.
So, I in a way disagree with Jordan Peterson because at least of what I interpret he's trying to say, which is, in saying every standard is a judge, is that you're held to these standards, right? And that other people are going to judge you based on them. And I think that, to me, is the problem. And we'll
Chris judge ourselves too, which is
that I don't find as a problem. Judging yourself to what standard you want to set yourself to is not a problem. That's called motivation, right? Judging others to a standard that you apply to them is a problem. And that's why I said what Chris is saying is a problem to me. He says we should all eat a salad. We should all strive to be healthy. Why? That's your standard, not mine or Nate's or somebody else's per se. And by applying your standard to somebody else, that's the problem. So in my opinion, standards aren't a problem. Ideals aren't a problem. Normal things aren't a problem, right? If most people want to be healthy, great. But when you walk down the street and you see somebody that isn't like you shouldn't automatically look at them and be like, oh, they're lesser or they're worse or they haven't achieved what I've achieved.
Totally, I agree.
Right? So I think applying your own standards and your own ideals onto other people is the problem. And this is something that I learned heavily when I was in Europe a lot, right? Is I stood out like a sore thumb. My jeans were baggy. You could see their nut veins through theirs, right? Like, it was insane how tight their clothes were. And I was American. I wore baggy clothes like an American. But nobody even looked at me again, like twice. Nobody looked at me like, oh, that guy's got shitty fucking taste in clothes. Nobody cared, right? And that was something I noticed in general was nobody cared about the guy next to him or in front of him, and they didn't care. Whereas here, if somebody stands out, everybody looks, everybody's staring at him, everyone's like, hey, that guy over there, what's going on with that? Right? We judge them. We hold them to our standards. And I think that's the problem.
Hey, for what it's worth, I know I said to eat a salad, but I've had Red Robin 5 times this month. Like, I'm not living by my own. I love Red Robin. I wish it was open right now. So I got to work on the salad thing too. So,
well, I'm just gonna let everybody know that I have high standards for y'all, and I judge you all for it.
Woohoo!
And, that includes the audience. You can all suffer. All right, I think that's it for us. I think I had a good time. What about you guys?
This is good. I'm gonna get ready to drive home.
Yeah. Now Chris has to drive home. Tim doesn't. It's not because he is home. It's because he's in jail, obviously. Doesn't have a driver's license. Would have to steal the van. They'd probably shoot him or tase him. I don't know. Yeah. Anyways.
Hopefully just tase, but that's a conversation for another day.
Damn, your green screen.
I felt that again.
From us, thank you for hanging out with us. Again, we've been putting out some clips recently. Check those out if those are more your style. I put much of the show up. You're probably just going to miss maybe the main segment and maybe our end segment, but we get some of the juicier bits of the news and memes. So yeah, check those out. Like those, or like this one, or like all of them. It helps us out a lot.
Sweet.
And I guess that's it. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out.
Good night, guys.
Peace.